The United States Penitentiary Pollock, located in Louisiana, USA, is widely considered one of the toughest and most heavily guarded federal prisons in all of America, and to this very day, the only truly successful escape from the high-security section of USP Pollock belongs solely to this man, Richard Lee McNair, on April 5, 2006. Today, we're going to hear and see the incredible story of Richard Lee McNair, the notorious criminal mastermind who has successfully escaped from 3 different prisons so far. You might not believe it, but in his last daring escape, Richard cleverly hid himself inside a shipping pallet and ingeniously used a homemade breathing tube, very similar to the ones experienced divers use underwater, to skillfully get past the prison's stringent security system. Stay with me until the end of the video as we uncover the secrets behind Richard Lee McNair's greatest modern escapes. Alright, without any further introduction, let's dive into the ingenious escapes of Richard Lee McNair. The first escape happened in February 1988 from the Minot City Jail in North Dakota. At that time, Richard had been arrested for murder during an armed robbery. After his interrogation, he was handcuffed to a chair, but the officers made a huge mistake. They had left the lip balm, the kind you use to keep your lips soft, on the table. Richard took advantage of the opportunity and used it to make his handcuffs slippery. That way, he managed to free himself from the handcuffs. Even more interesting, as soon as he got out of the handcuffs, he jumped out of the 3rd-floor prison window, but didn't break any bones or get injured. It was like he landed on all 4s like a cat and just ran away. Of course, Richard was caught again 3 days later, but even during those 3 days, he had all the state police chasing after him. But the second escape happened in October 1992 from the North Dakota State Penitentiary. 4 years after the first escape, McNair and 2 other inmates came up with an escape plan. At night, instead of sleeping, they secretly started unscrewing the bolts of the ventilation duct. Of course, since this made noise, they would put a pillow or blanket between the tools and the metal to muffle the sound so the guards wouldn't get suspicious. Afterwards, they would stick the bolts back in place with chewing gum, as if nothing had happened at all. Using chewing gum had 2 advantages. First, when chewing gum dries, it has a mild stickiness, but not so much that you can't remove the bolt again. Second, when the guards checked with their flashlights, the bolts looked completely normal. In short, they worked on this plan for almost 5 months without the prison guards finding out. Then one night, they escaped through that same tunnel. They used a rope to lower themselves from the roof and disappeared. Interestingly, one of the escapees was caught a few days later, but McNair managed to stay on the streets for a full 9 months and even drove around using fake names. In the end, Richard got caught in Nebraska because of a car accident and was exposed. But if you think that was the peak of McNair's creativity, just wait for the rest. The third escape, which happened on April 5, 2006, from the high-security federal prison USP Pollock in Louisiana, was Richard Lee McNair's most famous escape. This escape is truly legendary. How so? Well, Richard had been transferred to the prison workshop, where inmates had to sort mail pallets and mail bags. But after a few months, a brilliant plan crossed Richard's mind. He came up with an idea he hadn't tried before. He hid himself among several mail bags. He even made a breathing tube out of plastic using industrial glue and hid himself inside a wooden pallet. You should know that the mail pallets were always taken out of the prison with a forklift, just like usual. So, none of the guards had any idea that there was a living person breathing in the middle of those pallets. Then, when the truck passed through the main prison gate, McNair freed himself from the bags and, just like an action movie hero, ran out and hid behind the railroad tracks. But the story didn't end there. A day later, while he was running alongside the railroad tracks, a local cop named Carl Bordland got suspicious of him and stopped him. At that moment, McNair was only wearing a tank top, shorts, and shoes. The cop told him, "You look like one of the escapees we're looking for." He replied, "That's unlucky to look like him. But no, man, I'm just a construction worker. I'm just out here to get some exercise." The cop kept insisting, and McNair kept denying it. McNair answered with total confidence and stayed calm, until the cop let him go and said, "All right, man, take care of yourself." But after this incident, McNair started traveling across different states in the US under fake names, illegally crossed into Canada, and went to various cities like Vancouver and Winnipeg. In short, during all this time, he was living under the fake name Robert Jones. He even used fake documents for driving, getting temporary jobs, and renting cars. Finally, after about a year and a half on the run, officers from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police in the city of New Brunswick became suspicious of a car and pulled it over. McNair tried to escape by car, but he wasn't very lucky and got caught. This time, however, they did not show him any mercy. As a truly troublesome and dangerous criminal, they sent him straight to ADX Florence, which is widely known as the most notorious and infamous prison in America. But when we talk about Richard Lee McNair's very first escape and his truly ingenious breakouts, maybe you also immediately think of the popular TV series Prison Break. Break time equals 0.5s/. In the first season of the show, the main character, Michael Schofield, uses his engineering and drafting skills to get himself into Fox River Prison to break his brother out. Right from the very first episodes, we see how Michael uses simple and seemingly harmless tools like a small screwdriver, a handkerchief, a clip, a pen, and even screws from the ventilation system to pull off impossible feats. It's interesting to know that Michael, just like in McNair's second escape, breaks out through the ventilation system. Michael, just like Richard, stayed calm and pretended he wasn't doing anything. All the while, he was carefully and methodically carrying out his plans one by one. In short, both McNair and Schofield were alike in terms of creativity and courage under harsh conditions. The difference was that Schofield was a fictional character, while McNair was a real person with remarkable skills and a strong mind. And of course, McNair didn't have the entire prison's blueprints tattooed on his body. Anyway, McNair had copied everything into his mind. I think Richard McNair is an example of dangerous intelligence and deceptive genius. Smart, meticulous, and brave, but his decisions destroyed his life and his family. Honestly, if this mind had been put to good use, maybe McNair could have become a great man and earned fame the right way. What do you think? In your opinion, who pulled off the greatest escape in history? If you have a guess, be sure to write it in the comments. Richard Lee McNair escaped 3 times, each time with innovation and confidence. From the lip balm trick to the postal pallet and even the escape story in Canada. But the big lesson from this video is that even the most secure prisons have their weaknesses. But more importantly, intelligence only becomes truly dangerous when it's combined with deception and crime. At the same time, this story reminds us that genius should be used in the right way, not to escape the law.